Welcome to Shoot the Breeze, a series on a podcast that celebrates the messiness of life, relationships, and Christianity, featuring my wife Lacey and myself, Nathan. It's creatively titled because it will be just us shooting the breeze, sometimes with guests, while occasionally saying something important. We hope you enjoy. Hello, and welcome to Shoot the Breeze. My name is Nathan, and I'm with my guest, Daniel Diemer.
It looks like you had to look at your computer to remember my name.
Diemer.
Diemer. Yeah, don't be like the pastor that married me and Holly and said my last name wrong.
Well, what did he say?
Diemer. He also called Holly Heidi.
Heidi?
One time. And then he caught himself.
That's hilarious.
Our wedding was hilarious.
I just did a wedding and 100% mispronounced the names. Actually, no, I got the...
You can do weddings?
No, yeah.
Wow.
I got the groomsman, his name completely wrong. I knew it before the ceremony. Yeah. In the middle of the ceremony, my brain glitched.
I think it makes it more funny. I don't know.
It was an awesome wedding. It was fantastic.
Yeah, neither of us were... I don't know. Nothing bad against people who want everything to go perfect, but I think when things go wrong, it made it more fun.
Oh, it's way more fun. And it makes it memorable.
Yeah.
Rather than just like a standard.
Exactly. I remember that moment where if you would have pronounced my name correctly, I wouldn't have remembered hardly anything.
Exactly. Okay, Daniel, tell me a little bit about yourself. Married. What do you do for a living?
Yeah, still married.
Still?
Well, I mean, I already referenced our wedding and my wife. So
I was going to say, is that like a question?
You could probably infer that I was married. So, yeah, I was just kind of...
Okay, so you're still married?
Yes.
That's good. There's no question in that.
Yes, got married on... Oh, boy, let's gloss over that because I don't remember the day we got married.
How many years?
Don't ask me that either.
Are you kidding me?
It was December 17th, 2008.
Okay.
So math is how many years we've been married. I'll let you do that.
2008?
Anyway, what? Yes.
So what would that be?
I don't know.
10,
math.
That'd be 18, 21, so that'd be 13 years.
Yeah.
14. Right? 13?
Sounds good, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I guess how far back do you want me to go about myself?
Just tell okay, so what do you do?
What do I do right now?
Yeah, what do you do right now?
I for a job to make money,
yes.
Pay the bills.
What's your career?
Okay. Just clarifying whether or not we're talking about hobbies or... So my career is... I operate a small portion of the power grid in Texas.
Okay.
The control rooms in Austin that I work out of that I have to drive to about every other week, which is... not fun. But, yeah, so that's what I do for a job.
So all the issues that we have in Texas with power is your fault exclusively.
Pastor Scott likes to make, yes, he likes to assume that, but no.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Our company, so one of the best spots in the land, on land, as opposed to offshore generation.
Okay.
One of the best spots on land in the state of Texas for wind generation is up in Amarillo.
Okay.
But that's actually part of a different power grid. ERCOT is its own power grid, right? And so for Texas to be able to get the wind energy produced in Texas, we had to build really, really long transmission lines from the Amarillo region down to, it was about 300, 400 miles of length, down to connect to the rest of the grid. So I I work for one of the companies that operate those transmission lines to kind of connect the wind generation to the rest of the grid in Texas.
Well, there's been some issue with like ERCOT and all that with Texas and all of that fun excitement.
There's I don't know. All I'll say is 99% of people have never even heard of ERCOT, and then a week later they're subject matter experts with everything that ERCOT does and the way that it should be ran. And so it's it was a lot of different issues. Yes.
Yeah. As they're all.
We'll just leave it there. I could probably talk the rest of this
No.
podcast about
Let's not please.
power generation.
Can we please not talk about power generation?
Well, electricity is pretty amazing.
I don't.
That's how I got my start. In the Navy, being a nuclear operator, you first had to learn a specific. So, like, my specific field was electrical. So I learned everything electrical to do with the nuclear reactor.
Okay.
So then I operated the nuclear reactor on a submarine, but I also operated like the turbine generators, for example. We worked on those and we operated those. So like kind of we operated the little miniature power grid with inside that submarine. And then also whenever the forward people
forward people.
Well,
like on the
I was going to use a derogatory term.
No.
We had a specific name for them that almost came back out of habit, but they're generally try not to discriminate.
No.
They're generally not the smartest people, and so they break a lot of things, and almost everything's electrical. And so, since electricians, even though we operate the reactor in the back half of the submarine, we're responsible for fixing everything.
Oh, okay.
So, like one example was when we we surfaced in the middle of the ocean, kind of off the coast. Well, not in the middle of the ocean. I'm sorry. It was off the coast of like Puerto Rico.
Okay.
And it was close enough to get cell phone signal, and so they were really, really excited to go topside and call their girlfriends and stuff. So they opened up the topside hatch a little bit too fast, and it flooded the leftover water that was in that hatch before it had a chance to drain.
Right.
And it trickled down a whole bunch of electrical panels, and so instead of us getting to go swimming topside, all the electricians were trying to isolate to figure out what their source of grounds were, and so we wouldn't burn up the submarine. So
how long were you?
That's an example of some of the fun stuff we had to fix.
How long were you in the Navy?
6 years.
Okay. Would you go in? Was it before you got married, or were you married at the time?
So 2000. Right after high school, 2003, I joined the Navy, and I got out in 2009. So I married Holly in 2008. The final year in the Navy was actually at dry dock in Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. That was
Where's that at?
Portsmouth.
No. I know about
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's more than one Portsmouth, to be fair. Okay.
Yeah, I was like, isn't San Diego a major port?
San Diego, yeah. So the sub bases are San Diego. There's one in Bremerton, I think, Washington.
Okay.
And then there's one in Georgia. And then there's one in Connecticut. Okay. So my home port was out of Connecticut. We had a dry dock up in Portsmouth. That's not where subs operate out of. That's just one of the dry docks.
Okay. What was your longest time on a sub? Like underwater out?
We did 6-month deployments, and then the longest time underwater is typically about 2 to 3 months. That's limited by food. We run out of food. And then we have to go to port to get more food.
So
we generate our own oxygen, water, stuff, everything.
Have you ever done, like you said, you go back to port, but is there something where you could go, like, basically surface and restock off of a supply boat? Anything like that?
So they used to have they kind of got rid of that. They used to have submarine tenders that would they had the ability to meet submarines in the middle of on their duty station or whatever. But they typically, I mean, if you think about the logistics of that, they typically don't do that because that kind of the sub has to travel far. Right.
It would give away the position.
Exactly.
Essentially. Yeah.
So,
no, it makes. I was wondering, like, instead of going all the way back to port, if like you could go halfway back, meet a supply boat, and then.
I think in general they don't do that because people would probably get crazy if they have to stay continuously out to sea.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So the port calls really kind of. They not only are kind of required for the food restock,
but it's also mental.
Yeah, it's kind of a mental break as well.
Did you ever see anyone like break? On the sub?
I don't think. Well, it's hard to tell. Not legitimately. There was a lot of attrition. Guys would go out like on one underway, and then they would be like, "I want to kill myself." And most of the time, there was just guys wanting off the sub, and because the Navy. The Navy's not going to sit there and call your bluff. It's like, you're joking.
Right.
Right. So it was something that I knew most of the guys that did this. You know,
Okay.
you could see them. Like, I'm not trying to joke about suicide or anything, but
No.
the guys that were claiming this were, everyone that I saw in particular on our submarine, they just wanted off the submarine. They
And that's fair. I mean, if you can't handle it, you can't handle it.
yeah,
And-
yeah. I mean, I guess some of it was maybe confined space thing, but most of them it just seemed like they didn't want to work, and
Okay.
which was actually good because on a submarine there's a lot less bodies, and so everybody has to pull their own weight, and if you lose a guy or there's a guy that's not pulling their weight, everybody has to step up and do a lot more work.
Well, and it's not only are they not pulling their weight, but they're also taking food, taking supplies,
Exactly.
all of that. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, no, we can do the same amount of work with less people, which would actually give us more supplies and more.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So it was actually kind of a good thing when they left.
Yeah.
But most guys just kind of didn't really want to do the work. So.
Right. Right. Okay.
I mean, to be fair, it's not for everybody. So some of those guys, you know,
Yeah.
I'm sure actually couldn't do it. So
And that's, I mean, fair. I'm guessing they found a better place, a better fit somewhere else in the Navy. Okay. What's your favorite way to waste time?
my wife says I have too many hobbies. That's that's kind of a loaded question.
You just got a new tractor, so now it's like playing with your tractor.
So this is my problem, right? Like, so this week it's playing with the tractor, and the week before it's computer games, and the week before it's, you know, might have been Warhammer 40K miniatures painting, you know, and fighting with other friends. And
See, that sounds
then
fun.
the week before it was, you know, might be board games, and then the week before it might be woodworking, and then the week before it might have been, I don't know.
Well, and I was gonna say your schedule.
All of the above.
Right. Your schedule lends itself, like you said, you work for the power grid in Austin, and you have a week on and a week off, right?
Right. Yeah. So my schedule's kind of hard to explain, but basically it's every 6 weeks I have 2 full weeks off.
Okay.
Built into the schedule.
Okay.
So also within those 6 weeks, I have 2 weeks where I work 84 hours and 7 days.
Okay.
So it's not quite on off, but it's somewhat closer. There's like a couple training weeks mixed in, and you know, like a normal day shift kind of just go help extra. So it's standard like 40-hour work week, but yeah, it lends to some really good hobby time. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah.
But yeah, the tractor is now my favorite hobby, and it's, I don't know, ever since moving out here and getting that acreage, it's a lot of fun. I find myself wanting to pursue, I guess, hobbies. My old hobbies became less desirable. It's a better way to say that, because I enjoy working hard, you know, because it's almost like a workout. Well, I mean, you've been out there before. It's like it's an endorphin rush, and you also make progress cutting down trees and clearing land, and you know, so you get a.
Well, and aren't you? Isn't your job? You're behind a desk most of the time. Right?
Yeah.
And so probably when you're on your weeks off, you're like, all right, I need to get out of here. I need to do stuff. And
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, no, I get that. I totally get that. That's like a lot of what I do is create resources, you know, and publish them online. So I'm in front of my computer the majority of the day. So anytime I can have a
it's
meeting,
like freedom.
I know. Anytime I can have a meeting or go help you on your land, like I love that stuff because I'm working with my hands. Oftentimes I'll go home and just go into my wood shop and build random stuff.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. Okay, if you had to pick in conflict, okay, are you a fight, flight, or freeze type of a person?
What do you mean?
Like in conflict, if either you and your wife, whatever, you and a friend are having a conflict, are you a fight, like, oh, I'm going to stand my ground? Are you a flight, like, oh, I'm going to withdraw and
I think
walk away? Or
I think it really depends on the situation, because I mean, on a submarine, we were all trained firefighters, and so we were trained to run towards a fire. Also, like, there was no escaping a fire. You know, it's like, to put it in perspective, a garbage can sized fire would cover the entire engine room, upper level, in smoke within a minute. And like, that's half of a 300-foot long submarine.
Wow.
So it's like, fires are really, really, also the heat doesn't escape, right? It's like, fires are really dangerous on a submarine. So with that, and also my current job, it's kind of trained into me when stuff happens, or like another example, we were in the car and hail started happening and it cracked through our windshield, and Brittany, like Holly was pretty scared and panicking, but I was fairly calm, and so it's like through situations like that, I'm I guess calm / fighting, controlled.
Right.
I'm normally pretty good with those situations, just kind of because of the military training.
Sure.
But when my wife and I fight, for example, and this is why I said it depends. When we fight, I originally kind of just want to like fight back.
Yeah.
But then I want to stay angry, like, because she's ready to resolve relatively quick normally.
Right.
But I want to stay angry. Like, I want to go sulk. So I'll typically try to run away and just stay mad in my room. Like, I'm just going to play computer games and not listen to her, And so this is where, like, I don't know, God really made us for each other, because she will come and sometimes she'll just slap me as like, you come, we're going to go work this out. Like, she will not let me kind of run away and, crawl into my shell and be depressed. And she'll kind of steer me back towards, reconciliation.
Right,
so
right.
It's, it kind of depends on the situation, I guess I'd say.
Okay. Excuse me. And finally, what would you say, this is just intro questions, okay? What would you say makes you feel most loved or cared for? Are you a quality time person, like words of affirmation, physical touch, gifts, or service?
Well, so like we read the 5 primary love languages book.
Yeah.
That's kind of where you're getting those from, I think, right? We did that before we were married.
Okay.
And mine was definitely physical touch.
Okay.
But after we got married, I found out that I think I was just kind of a young guy and not really knew what I wanted.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
So it's totally not physical touch now.
Okay.
I mean,
so you don't like it when I hug you?
I mean, with friends, no. It's like, I don't know. I think it's still up there on my love languages, because I love giving guys hugs. I love kind of punching guys and giving them a hard time, and
you and I have
wrestling
this
around. But like. Sorry, you could...
No, I was gonna say you and I have this thing where like we'll kind of hold on to each other as long as like make the other person try to feel the most awkward.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the game we used to play in the Navy.
No,
we won't talk about that though. But
we're not gonna talk about the games you played on the sub.
but you had to do some stuff to keep you sane. So I'll just leave it there.
But okay, so now like, would you say it's a service? Would you say it's gifts?
I think it's more service. Like, it means a lot to me when Holly makes me dinner or brings me food.
Sure.
It's like, that means a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I still like the hugs and stuff, but honestly, that doesn't really matter as much anymore. I want food made for me.
Right. So food is your
well,
food
a lot
your
because I hate it, but also because it's just, I don't know, like, time is a pretty important thing to me, and so when others take their time to do something for me, it really means a lot. So I think that's a big one for me.
Probably service then, right?
Service, yeah, acts of service, yeah. Okay. I guess that'd be the most parallel there.
So working on a sub, I mean, you said you have a lot of electrician knowledge, but working on a nuclear sub, and then now you're in the energy and energy business. You there's no way to get around like saying this without making it sound like I'm being facetious, but I'm not. But like, you have to be a fairly smart person. I mean, you like, with regard to science, with regard to just how your brain processes information. I imagine, and you and I have had talks about this, how you're very analytical, very like A plus B is C, and like just concrete, I think is maybe the better term. So what are some things, and you and I have had conversations about this, but like being very analytical, when you become a Christian, there are elements of a Christian life, being led by the Spirit, that don't lend themselves to being analytical. Not that we like have fairy tales that we believe in, but there are elements of our walk where it's like, I don't know how this is going to work out. How have you dealt with like what are some things that you've learned in your walk with the Holy Spirit that have challenged you, and what are some of the most challenging things that you've dealt with?
I guess it's good that you kind of started with the background questions, because this relates directly to my Navy experience, where I was a young kid just out of high school in the Navy, and they taught you the submarine force is a little bit different than the rest of the military, where they teach everyone to question everything.
Okay.
And if, so it's not like the officer tells you to do an order, you follow it. It's the officer tells you an order, and if you know that's going to harm the reactor, you say, no, like, I'm going to do this instead. And, if you're nice about it, you kind of... Never mind. I'll just... I won't go into some... Anyway. Okay. So they taught you to question everything, because they didn't want one guy to kill, multi-billion-dollar asset and several hundred guys, right? And so, also, it's kind of the direct opposite. We learned a lot of mistakes from the Russian Navy, the Russian nuclear Navy. So we studied Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island and all of the historical nuclear accidents. The reason the Army can't play with nuclear physics anymore is because one of them got impaled with a control rod stuck up on the ceiling, because they were on top of the reactor core trying to pull a stuck control rod out of its position where it was stuck, and it moved like this much, but basically,
like 3 inches.
Yeah, but because of nuclear physics, they only had 3 rods in there, so each rod has that much more positive reactivity that it adds to the core with an inch, as opposed to our nuclear cores had 22 rods, right? So you move one of them 3 inches, and it's a lot less reactive.
Okay.
But anyway, he got impaled on the ceiling, and so they weren't allowed to play with nuclear power anymore.
Okay. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. This is one of the many resources we make available for free at our website, cultivaterelationships.com. Our resources have helped people grow in their relationship with God and others. We've seen people set free from uncontrollable anger and paralyzing fear. We've witnessed estranged family members be reunited after working through our freedom booklet. We've helped people build healthy relationship and coping habits through our coaching videos. And all of these resources are made available for free because of the generous support of people like you. If you would like to become a partner, please visit cultivaterelationships.com/support. Now, I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode.
We're taught, the Russians had a bunch of trained monkeys, you pull this lever, you get a banana. They didn't really understand why they did things. They had one really trained officer that understood everything.
And then
but everybody
else communicate.
Do this. Exactly. Everybody else just knew, okay, so if the temperature goes to here, I need to do this to lower the temperature. They didn't really understand why they were doing it. Right. So when they started having casualties or problems, they didn't really know what to do if there wasn't a procedure for it. And the Navy trained the exact opposite, where they taught you to analyze everything. So they taught us down to the basics, nuclear physics. Here's an electron, here's a proton, here's how diodes are made, here's how you make a circuit card, here's how basic electricity works, all the way through heat transfer, fluid flow, thermodynamics, nuclear physics, right? And then all the math that goes behind nuclear physics as well. So everyone on that submarine that was a nuclear operator understood, okay, so if we lose auxiliary seawater cooling, that means we're going to lose engine freshwater cooling, which means we're going to lose the ability to cool down the turbines and the reduction gears, which means the submarine won't be able to go because it could, there's no cooling for the oil. So it's
everything overheats.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so then you get into fires, you get into all these.
Yeah, possibly. So it was more of an overall training of understanding everything, so we could ask the question, hey, you hear this weird noise, that doesn't sound right, have a questioning attitude, so start questioning everything. And kind of the other operators on the submarine, they found out that I was a Christian, and they were like, Diemer, you understand nuclear physics, but you still believe in God, you're an idiot. It's and this is kind of the problem in the more engineering related, scientific, doctors, the more you get down those fields surrounded by other people, it's there's no need for God. Science can explain everything. And so why are you a Christian? There's no need for God. And so that's kind of the general mentality with most people out there. And it kind of started me as like, questioning is like, well, I'd accepted Jesus in my heart at 5. So, I grew up in the church. I was a Christian, but so I knew kind of, okay, like this is right. This is true. Like I know I'm a Christian. I know Jesus is right. Like you feel the Holy Spirit, but that was my heart and my soul. Like my mind is like, this doesn't make any sense. Like why, is any of this true? Is any of this true? What is truth? So I kind of started on a truth knowledge quest at that point, and started reading a lot of books and started just thinking about things. I remember like the first thing I thought about was, what's the difference between Christianity and basically any other religion?
Okay. Oh, are you asking me?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in terms of the simplicity of that, I would say Christianity, or even in a sense Judaism, but more so in Christianity, everything else is pointing to I have to try to achieve relationship with God. Mm-hmm. Whereas Judaism, or I'd say Christianity as the fulfillment of it, is God has done everything to achieve relationship with us in terms of he's the catalyst of it all. We are simply responding out of that, right? Is that a fair?
Yeah.
I don't know what your answer is.
No, that's what I was kind of curious.
Yeah.
What others thought of this topic too, because one of the things that I'd never really thought about was, you always hear, well, at least I always heard that the New Testament writers were just a bunch of idiots that wanted power, that came up with a religion. They created it all themselves so that they could have power and, some prestige. And
I was going to say, they're the least powerful people.
I know, but on the surface, like, if you weren't, like, obviously they didn't really read their Bible or study.
Let me show you how much power you have.
Right.
We're going to throw you in a coliseum with a bunch of wild animals.
Right.
Feel powerful.
Right, and that's one of the arguments I'll get to, but one of the, that's kind of like, what idiot would create a religion that goes against like the entire world is basically works-based, right? It's like grow up, work hard, get a good job, get some skills, and make more money. And
well, and even you
see that with religions too, as what you mentioned,
right? And you look at even the almost sometimes I would say the default of Christianity is believing I have to work to achieve this.
Yeah, to your point, there's a lot of Christians that believe that's how you get to heaven.
Yeah,
it's works-based.
Exactly. And I think that's where so we're pushing up against both a worldview or a world culture of you are the one that makes the effort, right? And it's even, you growing up, what's the big thing is your parents want to teach you how to work hard, work good, all of these things culturally, which are not technically wrong, right? I mean, you don't want to be lazy, you don't want to mooch off the government, but it's let's not get political. That's the most political I'm going to get, okay? No, but it's like it's even like our culture is wired toward.
I agree. Most parents should teach their kids that. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I agree.
Go ahead.
Most should. Okay. Anyways, no, but like, right? I mean, that's what legalism is. That's why you get into these denominations that, while they speak about faith, they're also immediately quick to follow up with, but if your lifestyle doesn't prove it, then.
Right. And that's kind of the first. That was the point of that. Is like. That was kind of the first thing that kind of just like, wait a minute, like something doesn't really add up here, because if someone was creating Christianity, how do they even get the idea to make it something faith-based? Like they would make it works-based, just like all of the other religions.
Literally all of the other religions.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, what kind of idiots would create this religion? Like, if, just like that really didn't add up. And so I started going further into it, and I came across a book by a guy named Frank Turek, and I think Norman Geisler also co-edited this one. But Frank Turek's gone on to edit some other or write some other books. But anyway, it was called "I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist," and the entire premise is. It really, really clicked with me because of all the science. Like we learned the second law of thermodynamics in the Navy, right? For the nuclear power has to
Yeah.
have entropy.
Yeah.
So the basically all of science paints a picture of the Big Bang Theory, and it's just amazing when you look at the evidence. It's I guess how technical do you want me to get? Because do you want me to explain the second law?
So here's the thing: is I love this. Okay, so I want you to go full into it.
Okay. So
and we'll just anyone who's doesn't like science,
I guess you can skip maybe the next 5 minutes. But this is kind of explaining why.
But this is the foundation. This is foundational, right? I mean, here's the thing: is I would say Adam and Eve and what God does as a consequence to their actions.
Right.
This is where we have scientific laws, right? Law of thermodynamics, law of entropy, law of things are breaking down, right? But
and I'm not even getting into I think they call it the metaphysical.
Right.
For example, why does gravity work the way that it does every single time? Why does it work the way that it does on Earth? Like there's a gravitational constant. I forget the equation, but it's based on roughly the mass. Well, not roughly. It is based on the mass of the planet.
Right.
The mass of the two objects that are interacting with each other.
Right.
And so why is that a constant here on Earth as it is, on any other orbital body in the entire universe? It's the same. I think they call it the big G in the equation. It's like, why is that a constant everywhere in the entire universe? Why does it work every single time? There's truths out there that we cannot explain with science because you use those truths to do science. Like it'd be arguing in a circle to try to prove. It's like you cannot use science to prove math because you have to use math to do science. So it's math presupposes.
Yeah.
Anyway, the second law of thermodynamics. Basically everything goes towards disorder, right? Everything. So if you have a cup of hot, steaming liquid like coffee that I just emptied, and a cup of ice cold water, and you put it in a cooler,
which I have,
right? So, like, if the cooler is the closed system, then eventually, with no heat transfer outside of that closed system, eventually, what's going to happen to those?
They're going to become baseline.
Exactly. Yeah. They're going to become exactly the same temperature. And so that's basically the second law of thermodynamics. Within a closed system, you will have things always basically equalize, proceed. They call it entropy. The entropy goes, oh boy, I don't want to get it wrong. The entropy goes down, I believe. Yeah. Because up is, maybe the entropy goes up. I can't remember which way entropy goes. I think it's...
But everything levels out.
Everything levels out. One of the ways entropy either increases or decreases based on disorder. So I forget whether that number is increasing or decreasing. But anyway, I've been out of the Navy a while. But anyway, everything in a closed system will eventually reach steady state. And if everything is the same temperature, you can't do any work. There's no life, etc. So if you imagine the entire universe as that closed system, what is eventually going to happen to the universe?
Planets will spin down. Suns and stars will burn out.
Exactly.
All of that's going to happen.
Yep. So if you paint the entire universe in a box, it'll eventually become equal temperature, and there's not going to be any work able to be done. All life is going to cease to exist. The universe
is going to stop expanding.
Exactly.
All of this. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, a lot of scientists like Albert Einstein already knew this, right? And so...
Well, and I would say even historically, it's interesting to look at a lot of the scientists through history who disproved global science, right? What the world was saying, were Christians, were people who studied everything, believing there was an outside entity. Right.
Well, that's an important point, because a lot of times you'll hear in the scientific community that you can't attribute anything to God, because then you'll stop doing science. If you just say, "Oh, it's God," then science is over.
Always
and like
cause and
exactly.
effect.
So it's like that's just like I don't know. They're just using scapegoats.
Well, it goes back to your point of what was it? The book where I have, what is it? I lack the faith to be an atheist.
I don't have enough faith to be an atheist.
Exactly. That's the thing is, there's far more questions in my mind of how things began if there was no...
Right. And I'm getting there. But the point is, all of this science, it widens the gap for atheism and it closes the gaps for Christianity. So just continuing on, if people know that second law of thermodynamics exists, then obviously we cannot have had an eternal universe. At some point, it had to start, because if it started forever ago, the universe would have already been extinguished and equalized at thermal equilibrium. So people knew that there had to be a beginning. And so some people like Albert Einstein thought, okay, well, maybe time was stopped, so the universe wasn't really equalizing, it wasn't really having that entropy effect happen, but it began forever ago. It's just like time didn't, advance. And so like there was theories out there to...
Well, was that his basis for essentially developing the theory of relativity?
That was actually what So the general theory of relativity states that time, space, and matter all have to coexist.
Right.
And so he didn't want that to be true, because he wanted there to be like an out, where this didn't have to happen. It could have existed forever ago, and it didn't really need a beginning, because it was just there. Just time didn't advance. No, he proved that time, space, and matter all have to coexist. So basically what those two theories claim, if you put them together in context of the entire universe, at some point in time, there had to be an absolute beginning of time, space, and matter. And they all had to happen at the exact same time. So...
Because you can't have one without the other.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so if you think about what picture this paints, this means that at some point there had to be, you talked about cause and effect. You mentioned that, right? Mm-hmm. So everything that has an effect has a cause. Everything that has a beginning has a beginner.
Right.
So if the universe had a beginning in time, space, and matter, that means the cause had to be outside of time, outside of space, outside of matter. It also, if you go a little bit further, it also had to be purpose-driven, because why else would there be a cause? If it wasn't purpose-driven, there would never be we wouldn't be here, because there wouldn't be a purpose.
No motivation.
Exactly.
For it to begin.
Exactly. Right. So this cause also had to be really powerful, because if you imagine, how do you create something out of absolute nothing? Aristotle defined nothing as what rocks dream about. Just think about that. Some physicists try to explain, the universe, there's this theory of quarks, and there's these quantum bubbles. There's these quantum bubbles that exist, and the quantum bubble is an actual place where there is no time, space, and matter. So this is how the universe could have started, where you have all these quantum bubbles and particles pop into and out of existence, because that's been proved in a quantum bubble.
Studying quarks is the most mind-bending.
But not to get sidetracked, what's the problem with the quantum bubble?
It's
something.
It's something.
Right. It's not nothing. So by definition. And this is the problem with all these scientists. They try to it's like they rule out God before they're not doing science. Think about a scientific hypothesis, right? It's, could this cause this? Let's do an experiment and see if it's true. Yeah. But the problem is they rule God out of the equation before they even do their science. So then
they're almost proving, they set out the scientific method, FIOC, right? Problem, hypothesis, experiment, observation, conclusion. They set out with their conclusion of there is no God.
Right.
So we have to... Okay, we're going to look at this problem in our hypothesis, and we're going to create experiments to prove our hypothesis that there is no God. And then they do these experiments, they observe, and it's like it gets down to worldviews. It has to get down to the baseline of worldviews. As you know, and I'm going to lump in agnostics, or someone who believes in an outside entity. Okay, and this is what. Is it intelligent design, right? Not everyone who's an intelligent design advocate is a Christian. They just believe and accept that there's another party outside of our system who's speaking into our system, right? And so that's the hard part with atheists, someone who believes there is nothing outside of our natural system, that they're going into the conclusion already with it set, and now they just have to back up experience to prove it.
Yeah, and so that's why they try to come up with those different...
Well, and it's even the dumbest thing to me, like taking Earth and evolution and humanity, so there's these theories out there. Well, we can't have a designer, or they're like, no, we have to have a designer because humanity, we already see some things designed, so we have to have a designer. Instead of that designer being God, let's have it be aliens. Well, who designed the aliens?
Yeah, so you're talking about talking about panspermia, which is actually one of, we haven't gotten to DNA. This is just the ultimate start of a universe, which, to be fair, does not prove that it's the Christian God. It just proves that there is something. If it was not, like, here's the issue. We know it cannot have been a natural cause.
Right.
So it has to be supernatural.
Right.
It's like that's your science proved that it has to be supernatural.
Right.
That's a fact.
That's what I'm saying.
So here's the problem with atheists. Yeah. They have 100% blind faith that somehow something natural caused the start to the universe. But based on just briefly what we talked about, it's impossible.
Right.
It's like you give them all the time in the universe, and they'll never find a natural cause for the beginning of the universe. But that's one of the arguments they use. Just give us more time. Yeah. And we'll eventually discover a natural cause for the universe. But it can't be.
According to your time, you've had billions of years.
Right.
No. Here's the crux, though. Again, getting back to worldview is, and I was in our last podcast, we were talking about spiritual abuse and the effects that it has on a person. And in my research, I brought up the fact that in my research, all major, proponents of atheism, there is no God, biographies that I've read have all been people who've experienced spiritual abuse as a child.
Well,
you take Richard Dawkins.
Yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head there, because if you look at a lot of these, and like Christopher Hitchinson. Yep. Hitchens or Hitchinson?
Hitchinson, I believe.
Yeah. I forget, but anyway, a lot of these prominent. He's passed away now, but so you use him in the past tense. But a lot of the debaters still talk about. It's like they have a problem with God controlling their sex lives. Yeah. And why is that an issue for whether or not there is a God in the first place? It's like they use that as an argument for, like, well, if there is a God, then he shouldn't care so much about this. And, like, who are you to say what God cares and doesn't care about? How does that negate the science? Yeah. Like, it's like so I think that kind of sums up the issue. A lot of people's their hearts are just hardened. Yeah. Either from past abuse or spiritual past spiritual problems, or
I think
they just don't want to change.
Right. And I think Richard Dawkins was an altar boy, if I'm
I think mistaken. That's right. Yeah.
And we all know the issues.
Yeah, we don't need to go there.
Okay. I'm just going to do a quick commercial break. In our bookshelf on our website, we have a section of books dealing with science, and I just want to go through a few of them. So there's some fantastic...
Is this a commercial break?
This is a commercial break for our website.
So you're not recording this?
No, I am recording this.
So this will be on the podcast?
Yes.
I don't understand.
It's okay. I'm giving a commercial break for our own resources. We're sponsored by ourselves, okay?
So I should not be talking now. You're talking. No. Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, though, on our website, so some of my favorite authors, Jonathan Wells, Jonathan Sarfati, I believe it is. But anyways, Refuting Evolution, Icons of Evolution is a fantastic book dealing with human progression, from essentially ape to man, that argument, which it's a fantastic book. Dinosaurs by Design, a lot of these are used in homeschool curriculums, but they're great. But Icons of Evolution is a big one. I really appreciate that one. Also, Astronomy in the Bible, Questions and Answers. Anyway, there's a ton of books. Refuting Evolution, I think I already said that one. Ton of books on our website that deal with this subject of science and how you don't have to believe in like unicorns and fairies to say, no, I believe God, and there's scientific proof dealing with age of the earth coming from the effects of a global flood. All of these issues can be resolved, but again, it goes back to that worldview. Is my view of science one where my conclusion is already based in there is nothing outside of nature? Or am I coming into science with the worldview that, no, I believe there is something out of nature, and all I am trying to do is discover what that is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's why if you take the Institute of Intelligent Design, not everyone who works in that institute is Christian. I believe they have some Muslims. I believe they have some Jewish people. They're all coming into it, though. Top grade scientists coming into the conversation with degrees, smart people, going, our only worldview is that there is something outside of nature. And so we're willing to put that in the answer box, right? We're willing to bring that in. Whereas I think atheists are at a disservice, people who believe in evolutionary science, macro evolutionary science, that they come in going, we're actually not willing to look at answers that deal with a outside party.
Exactly. They're the ones actually not doing science.
Exactly. Because they're already drawing a conclusion stating this is not an answer, so we have to keep looking.
Right. It's kind of the absurdity of, is that a word?
Absurdity? Yeah.
I'm just making sure. Another one is you talked a little bit about DNA, right? There's a fascinating book, especially if you are any type of medical science major at all. I'm pretty technical and can understand and follow most things, even if I don't have a prior knowledge of them. But this book I could follow most of it, but a lot of it was kind of, I forgot a lot of it. It went over my head. But it was called Signature in the Cell. I forget the author. But
yes,
that book is amazing, and I forget the exact, I wish I could have this memorized, but there was a scientist who actually went through and calculated the probability of DNA forming by itself.
Yeah.
And it was something like 10 to the 20,000th power.
Yeah.
It's just, that's infinity. Like, it's no chance that it formed by itself.
Yeah. Statistically, no.
Right. It's like there's literally not enough time in the history of the universe for this to have occurred. And that's where it's like, okay, well, how can we explain away this infinite unprobability? Like, well, let's just multiverse. So with infinite universes, eventually you'll get one that that unlikely probability happened. And so here we are today. Right. We just happen to be it's like, what? You'd have to be God to know that there's a multiverse. Like, how do you even, like, what are you basing this off of? Like, it's the only thing that works. Like, we got
moving
it.
The goalposts.
Right.
It's like they'll carbon date something. Well, then they'll find something within that section and be like, oh, that has to be older because it can't exist here. So our carbon dating's wrong.
Right.
Let's recalibrate.
In that same book, the guy talks about all these different scientists that try to work these odds and figure out how life began. And some of them are using like computer algorithms to like, okay, so we get this protein and this protein, so we're going to throw away these bad proteins, and we're going to use these other proteins to try to come up and form a cell. It's like you're using design in your computer algorithm to throw away. Like, that doesn't just happen in nature. It's like so these experiments that eventually try to prove life. It's like they were written like they actually have designers in them.
But you're already, if you have a problem and a hypothesis, and then you manufacture your experiment, you can't manufacture your experiment, right?
Exactly.
Like exactly what you're saying.
Exactly.
I'm going to design my experiment to prove my hypothesis. No.
Right. And
the
so that's
experiment is
it
all
goes
about...
back to that
It's why
it goes back to panspermia, right?
Because it's like we have double-blind systems in terms of experimentation so that we can't manipulate the results.
Exactly. So it kind of goes back to segueing back to the panspermia theory, seeds everywhere. That's where that comes from, because the odds of it's impossible for life to have formed by itself.
Right.
So it had to be aliens.
Right.
Because aliens would explain that there is no God. It's like, well,
wait,
so number one, you're saying like you said, who created the aliens? But the bigger thing for me is like, so you believe in intelligent design, just not intelligent design. It's like, are you like
right?
It's like at the end of Zoolander. I feel like Will Ferrell is like, am
I taking crazy pills?
Right. It's like
yeah.
Oh my goodness. It's just
so
the and that's just. Yeah, sorry.
No.
You can go ahead.
I was gonna say, so one thing that I want to wrap this around to, and this is
closing time.
Dude, we've been talking for a while.
Okay.
No, and I wanna, depending on where you land, I'm genuinely curious, but I want to give you where I land on stuff. So, I am a 7-day creationist. That's where how I read into scripture. And I believe that a lot of the quote unquote, age of the earth stems back to what happened I believe in a global flood. And a lot of our experiments and what we do with our hypotheses have to incorporate a global flood into it. And I'm not just saying like, this is my belief, like out of a vacuum. There's science that shows, and you see within, for example, the Grand Canyon, you see multiple layers, right? Supposedly being millions of years old. Each
you mean
layer.
That wasn't where Paul Bunyan drug his axe?
Yeah, no, that was in Minnesota. But yeah, no, and so you see these multiple layers with fully developed trees going through multiple layers.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, I have science. I have evidence to back up my worldview of this. And so that's where I land is in the theological, maybe the theological ramification of that is, and I know a lot of Christians who do believe in evolution or a form of evolution, and my response to that is you theologically cannot have death before Adam and Eve, which would void...
Well, to clarify, here's one of the key things I think you need to do whenever you talk about stuff like this is, what do you mean by evolution?
Yeah, and so I'm looking at macro, which is macroevolution, which is the change of one species into another species. Okay.
To be clear, I think we both believe in microevolution.
So microevolution is there's a fantastic Nova video on this. It's called Ghost Within Ourselves. It is a fantastic video.
Does it talk about epigenetics?
Yep. But more than that, he talks about how our genes are not these dials. They're more like fader switches, and depending on where your fader switches will affect other fader switches. Yeah. And so it's how incredibly complex our genes are that scientists used to think it was like on off. And then they realized, oh no, it's actually like a dial, doot. Well, and then even beyond that, it's like a fader. There's so many other complications.
On that, it's really interesting if you look at something called junk DNA.
Oh, yeah.
It used to be scientists, and this kind of relates to what we talked about before, where the false narrative is, oh, Christians shut down science. But here's an example where all of the evolutionists, atheists, believe that, oh, well, we evolved and the junk DNA was just the leftover DNA. Like, we only use what is like 3 or 4 or 5% of our DNA, and the other 90 or 95%, whatever that value is, that's all junk. And it's useless. It was just leftover of the evolutionary process. And Christian scientists actually, so atheists, okay, we're done. We're not going to research that anymore because it's solved problem.
But
so
see,
Christian
you
researchers,
your ability to look at science,
right? And so Christian researchers are like, wait, if this was designed, this has a purpose, and so they kept on looking at it, and they found out that it actually does have a purpose.
Shocking.
And one of the things that we mentioned was epigenetics, and that's where like. It's remarkable when they try to take like rat embryos and they try to make them into another species, but it will always either die or become a rat. Like you cannot make it into something else because there's something else hidden, like behind the surface layer of DNA, and this is where the epigenetics.
Well, it's like computer code, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It'll always try to be a rat because it knows that it's a rat, and so it'll always either die or it'll morph back to being a rat. Right. And so it's like that's just further proof. Like, if they can't even get a rat embryo to change into something else in a lab, like trying to force it to be something else.
Wait. Wouldn't that be a designer though?
Well, yes. Also that, right? And just the way that people look at things, they're like, oh, like we have a 90. What's the percentage of code in our DNA that's similar to like?
So like an ape, for example.
Right.
And I'm gonna fudge the numbers because I'm not exactly sure, but it's like we're like 93% similar to an ape.
Right.
And we're like 97% closer to a banana.
But this is where the matter of perspective, when you have a closed mind and think that there is no God, you automatically rule out the possibility of what programmers do in real life. We talked about HTML a little bit. Like that's not a coding language, but it is or programming language, but it is a language.
It's a coding.
Right. And so any computer program, any language, when you program something, hey, we're going to copy this function. It works. We're going to do it over here and call it over here. Like, you copy the parts that work, and you reuse them. Reuse them in other parts of the program. If we have a common designer, of course some of the code's going to overlap and match. Because why would you reinvent the wheel?
Right. Why do 100% of the cars have round wheels?
Right.
Because it works.
Exactly.
And it's using the coding analogy. So we were talking earlier before the podcast about how like computer and website coding, and I was telling him how I code our website, and it's one of those things where I'll find a code on a website to copy into my website, and inevitably I'll look at it and be like, wow, this is overcomplicated. I don't need all of this code, and so I delete part of the code, right? Yeah. Thinking I'm only keeping the skeleton of what I actually need, and inevitably I lose something on my website because I'm deleting things that are, I don't perceive it as useful. Obviously they are, because now I've lost the ability to do a function that and I think that's the thing is we look at the appendix, these vestigial organs that are useless. Well, they're finding they actually carry a ton of uses in dealing with toxic chemicals in our body, absorbing toxic chemicals, right? Like all these things. And it's like if you already go into science with the hypothesis that there's useless coding, end of conversation, you are actually diminishing your ability to be a credible scientist because you're already going in with, I no longer need to research that. Right. I no longer need to ask the why question.
I gotta. Oh no, my phone's shutting down. I had a couple really good quotes. On that topic.
Do you remember them? Like, can you?
Yeah. I can paraphrase.
Butcher them.
It's like Bill Gates looked at DNA and he's like, "This is the most complex computer program ever written." Yeah. It's like someone who writes programs understands. Hey, this looks like another program. Right. It's like. Every piece of software had someone that wrote that code. It's like you can look at a sentence. Yeah. Say you're walking in a forest and you see Daniel loves holly written in the dirt. It's like, that must have happened from nature. It's like, no, you instantly think, hey, that was a person that wrote that with probably a stick or something. Right. Like that's not natural in nature. And so it's like something as simple as a sentence, our brain instantly thinks, hey, this had a creator. Yeah. But Richard Dawkins himself says the most simplest form of DNA, a cell, it's equivalent to 1,000 volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica. How? Like that's 1,000 volumes. Like one of them's like this thick. It has this much code. It's like, are you kidding me? And you think that much code that has to happen in perfect order? Right. Was created naturally by evolution. When you walk across a sentence in a forest or like magnets in the fridge, it's like, oh, that says I love mom. It's like, well, that probably didn't happen from a tornado.
Just a bunch of ants,
and it's like this is infinitely more complex than a single word or a sentence. And it's just
Richard Dawkins also said, for someone who doesn't believe in God, that he hates God.
Right.
So-
So back to Richard Dawkins, his own quote said, "We must always remind ourselves that DNA has the appearance of design." How does he know it's just the appearance of design? Like,
Right.
he admitted himself that it looks like a designer wrote the code,
Right.
but nope.
Well, and
It's just the appearance.
We never
How does
touched
he
on
know
this.
that?
Right.
You'd have to be God to know that.
Right. we never hit on it. We kind of talked around it, but are you familiar with the mousetrap theory?
No, but I wanted to go back to your question because it looked like you were asking me what I believe in Genesis. Like,
yeah,
right?
like what is your kind of where do you
So
land?
this is an interesting thing, and I think this is important because when I started talking, my dad doesn't understand the science that I tried presenting to him, but he's like, "Daniel, you don't believe in the Big Bang, do you?" You know, it's like Christians have this stigma. I think a lot of the time there's like, "Oh, if you believe in the Big Bang, you don't believe in God," and it's really interesting because all I know, looking at the science, either God caused the Big Bang, and this is not in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
This is just looking at the science, and the other thing I didn't get at is to confirm the Big Bang. They launch satellites and they look out in the universe. There were two scientists that I believe they were messing with radio towers.
Okay.
And they were like, "Hey, we keep getting this background interference." It was Bell Labs. I forget their names. It's like Penzias and anyway, I don't remember. But they're like, "We keep getting this interference. What is this interference?" And one of them was like, "You know what? I bet you this interference is something to do with cosmic background radiation."
Right.
And so basically they theorized if there was a Big Bang, you would see this ripple throughout the entire universe. And eventually they launched this satellite called Kobe that when it got out into the I forget where they launched it, but basically it could see this electromagnetic wave throughout the entire galaxy. And it's like verified 0.0005 or something like that. So it's like it basically confirmed the Big Bang.
Yeah. Or at least a beginning.
Right.
A beginning.
It's just amazing the science behind the Big Bang. And the point is either God designed all of this evidence to make it look like there was a Big Bang, or there actually was a Big Bang. It's like those are the only two possibilities in my mind.
Like in an instant, things were created.
Exactly. Because and so in my head when I read Genesis, now I'm not a pastor, so this isn't biblical.
Well, here's the
biblical,
here's the thing.
When
theology and science should line up. There should not be a contradiction there.
When I read Genesis, first of all, it's kind of confusing because it looks like, wait a minute, this part looks like it repeats a little bit, and this part, like I thought this was already created. So it's kind of already written from a standpoint of not necessarily chronological order.
Yeah, it's not a science textbook. It's never meant to be. How the Jewish writers wrote was not to be like, and when our facts and figures machine goes, no, it's he's telling a story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So my point there is kind of there was a Big Bang, I believe, and then if you look at what if you read the very first couple of verses in Genesis, it sounds a lot like what a Big Bang would be, and then the rest of Genesis, it makes it seem like, okay, this is God going back and reordering. It's like, okay, I'm gonna put an Earth here, I'm gonna put a planet here, I'm gonna fine tune. So one of the arguments I didn't cover is the teleological argument. In other words, the design or fine tuning of the universe. There's a lot of factors for why we exist. Like if Jupiter didn't exist, we would probably be imploded by a comet, or if the thickness of the Earth's crust was off by a little bit. Either way, we would not. So there's like hundreds of different factors of this fine tuning,
and they're all within just a percentage point or less of why it has to be exactly that.
Yeah, and
like
the
literally
odds
within feet away from the sun. Like,
exactly.
Yeah,
and the odds of this all happening naturally is equivalent to, it's 10 to the 120th power, which is more than there's like 10 to the 70 atoms in the known universe, right? It's like the odds. So like if you did that math, it'd be the equivalent of marking a grain of sand, putting that in, mixing it all together with all the sand in the entire world, and you have to go find that one grain of sand, pick it out on the first try, 6 times in a row.
Yeah,
it's like that's the odds of all of this just randomly happening. So I think one way or another, the Big Bang definitely happened, because God gave us minds and he gave us science. I don't think he would just I just made this look like it happened, but it didn't really happen. So
Well,
I think the Big Bang really happened, and then he just fine-tuned. The rest of Genesis is him fine-tuning that creation. And so that's how I think. I think, to your point, it is really important to know, it wasn't written scientifically.
Right.
It's
But what you do see...
But you see that in our language, too, where, hey, the sunset is like, the sunset?
It went down?
You mean the sun revolves around the earth?
Yeah.
Like the sunset?
Right. No, but it's also looking at taking the context of Scripture as a whole, and you see writers referencing Genesis, which is a story, right? It's not a scientific story. It's not a scientific handbook, but they make definitive statements. So you see in Exodus, why does God give the Sabbath? Why does he make that a rule? Mm-hmm. He says, because God created earth in 6 days.
That's a really good point.
And then he rested. And then you also see this inferenced in Jesus when he's talking about same thing, creation. Why is Sabbath? Man is not made for the Sabbath. Sabbath was made for the man, because God created in 6 days and on the seventh. And so you see, it's not a scientific book, but there are emphatic statements made throughout the story that point to this is a real thing. This is an actual event that took place.
Right.
And then there's rituals based upon the story that require dates and times and settings and seasons. And then you see in Psalms, the idea of why the crazy cosmics? Well, they're given for our navigation. I mean, for thousands of years, the only way we can navigate was via that star, that constellation. That's why they're created, is for us. And I think, again, getting back down to the theological side, is we are the crown of God's creation. We are very good. That is what God says about us. We're the creme de la creme. You talk about purpose. We're the purpose that he created everything. So everything is to our benefit, which is a statement of our importance, which goes back to you cannot have death before Adam, because Adam and Eve were the ones that kind of screwed this whole thing up. And out of that came death. And out of that death came Jesus has to come and redeem us, because we're the most important thing that he's done. Right?
Yeah, I think you hit on an important topic, because I don't want to keep talking.
No, I want to know what it is. Dude, we should come back and do a part two, because
we should. But
I could keep going.
But real quick, it was about the point of everything has a specific purpose for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important to acknowledge, because we're not made to live eternal. We don't have titanium bones for a reason. It wasn't a design flaw that our bones break. We were created with a specific lifespan.
No, I disagree. I disagree.
Okay.
A lot of that came out of, again, why were people in the Bible living for so long? And this goes back into not astrology.
Well, it's their gene pool wasn't perpetually,
and
it didn't have all the flaws that it currently has today.
You got to go back into the sustaining outside party, right? We're not in a igloo box, going toward that neutral. We have God in Colossians, who talks about I am in everything, right? I am the constant in everything. And when you remove the being that sustains us, when you remove that sustaining power, what happens? You get entropy. Then you start to fall down.
Well, there's also, do you ever listen to the Bible Project podcast?
Love the Bible Project podcast.
It was really fascinating. Shout out to them if you want more information on this. But one of their earlier podcasts starts talking about
our Bible resource on our website is based off the Bible Project.
Oh, awesome! Yeah. So one of their earlier podcasts, it's if you go back in time to their beginning, it talks about the beginning, God and Adam and Eve, and it talks about how God literally breathed his ruach, I think is the word.
Yeah.
Breathed his breath into us, and that is the sustainer of our life. And it's it's different than the Holy Spirit. It's he equated it to batteries. Like, we live because we have borrowed batteries from God inside of us, and when God decides to take those batteries away, that's when we die.
Yeah.
So, but my point back there, I mean, we kind of got off topic, but as far as light, like, we were not made here on Earth to live forever, and I think that's because if we were, it's like, well, what's the point of heaven? You know, it's like people.
No, but heaven's supposed to be here on Earth.
Right, but people go into. I'm talking more about the topic of heartbreak and like pain.
We were never supposed to die. That's why grief and that's why loss is so hard, right? I think it's something within us, within how we were designed, that we were never meant to experience. And I think
but it also makes us stronger.
I can punch you in the face and make it strong. It doesn't mean like that's healthy. Like doesn't mean that that's a good thing.
I think it is because the struggles here on Earth that we go through just paint a picture of like if you got everything that you wanted here on Earth.
Right.
What kind of a person would you be?
I don't disagree that we need something to press against us with regard to faith, right? Dude, okay, I gotta wrap this up. You and I need to do another podcast.
Yeah.
I could care less if people are listening right now. Like, this is fantastic. I love this discussion. I'm going to cut it off right here. Daniel, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. This has been incredible. And we will definitely do a part 2 because I think we're getting into
maybe if we could get a fan blowing because it's getting hot in here.
Okay, you know what? All you do is complain.
I've been sweating for the last 15 minutes pretty good.
All right, guys.
Sorry. On that note.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.